So we picked up this part 7310 with a bad crank. Well, I happen to have a good crank, but it's got a whole lot more stroke. So we're going to try and stuff this long stroke crank into this Echo chassis. Let's see what it's going to take. So here we have all of our parts for our stroker. Echo 7310, factory, 51mm bore, 36mm stroke. And we're going to bump that up a little bit. I've got this steel 660 crank that showed up with a chip in it. I was going to weld this chip and blah blah blah, but I just so happened to need a crank. Well, the steel 660 is a 40mm stroke. So we're going to try and stuff this 40mm steel crank into our Echo chassis. Look at that, we're halfway there already, but it's the other half that gets difficult. And I wanted to walk through some of this stuff with you guys. It's a fun project. This is just going to be a firewood saw, even though 51mm by 40mm stroke is right there at the maximum 5 cube limit. So I've got my future race build back behind me, and we'll get that one on the dyno later. But we'll stick with this stroker. We'll get these cases bored, do a little bit of crank work, get this crank fitted in there, and then we'll talk about some of the issues that rise with these projects. So our Echo showed up with a bad big end bearing. I've got a little bit of teardown footage. I'll show you that. So today we're going to start on our second stroker project. Lots of people have been throwing different cranks and different saws for a long time. Charles has done some, Brendan's done some recently here on YouTube, and we're going to try one now. So this is an Echo 7310 that I picked up. Has a bad crankshaft. So I figure, what better time to stroke a chainsaw than when we already got to throw a crank in it. So looking around at the various parts and pieces that I've acquired, happened to find a crankshaft, inboard clutch that had a longer stroke than what our 7310 offers. And we're going to make this more along the lines of its 80cc older brother, the Echo CS800. But we're going to keep our bore size, and we're going to just add stroke. But this is just a super quick teardown just to see what this steel crank looked like. Well, it happens to share the same size clutch threads and pitch with our Echo. The 7310 uses 6202 bearings, which they make a conversion bearing to run 6202 OD with the larger diameter ID journal. Easy enough to grind a spot for the seals to run. And we got enough length. Got enough length and enough size to get the tapers matched to run the Echo flywheel. And I will have to get a little creative. We'll have to cut into this journal here, weld up our undercut for the threads, and we'll have to cut new crank threads. But we can do all that on the lathe, and I just need to narrow this crank just a fuzz. So we'll go get this. I'll show you how we set up these cases in the boring machine to get this all bored out to fit our steel crank diameter. Alright, so here we are. I've already got the clutch side case half set up in our boring machine. we'll get started roughing that out. I just wanted to go over how this works. Saw case, nice and machine flat, and we know that our crank bearings are perpendicular to this surface. So this surface goes flat against the boring machine, and then I use a cone right here, fits snug over the boring bar, and as it drops into the bearing, it centers us on the crank bore. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this diameter here. I will have to get rid of most of this boss right here, but we're going to open this up as much as I dare. These are going to get awful thin around these bolt holes, but I think with some good sealer we can get it sealed up nice and tight. Now we're going to have to go slow. It doesn't have a lot of, it's got a lot of leverage on that, so we'll have to go slow. Looks like a nice slow and steady finish cut with that new insert's doing exactly what we want it to do. So once we're done here, I'll pull it out, and that should be our finished size, and then we'll make the crank fit that bore. Now this right here may or may not really wake up your bonfires. Alright, a fresh insert was all that we needed to get a super nice finish. Now I'll have to hand blend that radius down there, but we got our main diameter just right, so we can take this one out and install the other half. So here it is, all finished up. Like I said, I still got a little bit of hand finishing I'll do in here, because as that cutter goes out, it goes deeper, so I started it off. Plus there's an awful big boss cast into these anyway. We're going to do our rough turning on the crank. I'm going to leave the bearing journals alone, but I need to narrow up the crankshaft overall width. So I'm going to take 25 thousandths off of each cheek, and then I'll reface the actual bearing stop here. So we'll get that all done in this setup. I'll pull it out, dial it in, get this side cut up, and we'll actually take a little bit off the diameter on this throw, and we'll have to polish our connecting rod just a little bit. Don't want that case getting too awful thin, but you can see not a whole lot, just a bunch of littles. And I'll probably even throw more of a bevel on this to help clear our cases. So I got my indicator all set up. I'll do a light touch off, and then we'll take our 25 off. Now this crank material is pretty hard, so we'll see how it turns. Alright, now I'm going to profile a little bit of this shoulder back because we'll have to extend the threads. So I'll get this close to the diameter of the threads, then I'll have to weld this up. We'll have to pick up this thread, finish threading it, and it'll be a couple more setups, but that's what we got to do. So I'm just going to get that roughed out of the way so I can get this undersized right here on the threads. That way our weld will be underneath the threads when we cut them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a little bit of weld in this undercut here because we need to move these threads down, and I didn't want this gap in the threads. So I'm hoping I can throw this weld in enough I got a little bit lower, that way we'll still be in the weld with the threads. And we'll be able to pick this thread up, take it all the way to this shoulder, and be able to grind down what's left of these threads and hopefully still have some hard material for our clutch bearing to ride on. Now that clutch bearing, it only works at an idle, so even if we're not super hard, that's not a super high wear area unless you're idling a lot. But we'll just have to remember to keep this one full throttle. So we'll call that done, and hopefully we don't make it too brittle. I know I probably should let it slow cool, and that's what we'll do. I'll go throw it in the toaster oven so it can slow cool. We had some stuff cooking earlier. So our low spot is now a high spot, and I'm going to take it and put it in that toaster oven right there so it can slow cool. Alright, well, we got our cases all bored out. I do have to epoxy one spot on this clutch side case. Got into it just a little bit, so I'll put some epoxy in the oil tank area and that should be fine. Just one little pinhole there on a recessed area. This is definitely pushing the limits of this case, which we're adding 4mm of stroke, so that makes sense. So we got our crank cooling down, and so while our crank's cooling down, I figure I could show you what will be my future 5-cube saw. I thought long and hard about making this Echo a 5-cube saw, but as I mentioned earlier, they just have a couple of things going against them, and this is going to be more fun as a novelty slash firewood type saw, and I think we'll just probably make this as big as we can. 7310 is a nice chassis, awesome air filter. I'm going to try and keep all that stuff intact, and with our stroker and our factory cylinder, we might be able to do that. But this is a Johnson Red 820. This is a 52mm bore, 38mm stroke, right there at that 81.5 cc's. Same as a Husky 281, 181. And this is right there at our 5 cubic inch limit for most race classes. Now, I've been acquiring these for a little bit. This one is my runner. I've got all sorts of part saws, but this is going to get the full race treatment. I'm going to put a big old honking carb on it, intake block, replate it, 2-piece head, big open muffler mod, and we even have to build a pipe for one of these because some races have a 5 cubic inch pipe class. So that's what we'll do with these. But I just wanted to see where this stacked up to some of the modern big 70cc class, small 80s. So, you know, 500i's, Dolmar 7900, Makita 7910s, the Husky 385s, maybe even a 390 XP. So I'll put this on the dyno and we'll see exactly what kind of power this puts out. So leave a comment, let me know what you think of this stroker project. Like I said, I ran into a couple hiccups along the way, and we'll bring it back when we finish the crank and everything else. But I just get excited when projects show up and just kind of got to go with them. But our crank is mostly fitted. I need to wait on some parts. And once we get all those parts, we'll bring it back, start working on the cylinder. And I'll probably just clean up this cylinder, clean up the piston, get a new ring, reuse all the old parts. So leave a comment, let me know what you think of the strokers. If you've ever run any of these 820s, these are going to be our new class race saws. Once we start working on these, I'll definitely show you guys that too. I'm going to continue to try and test different things in these videos, so leave a comment if you notice something new, something you like, something you don't like. So here we have the Johnson Red 820, fresh out of the box. The recoil is messed up, so I swapped on a spare I had. As far as I know, nothing's done to this saw. 52 millimeter, 80 cc, 81 cc, 52 millimeter bore, 38 millimeter stroke, same as the Husky 181, 281. And there's a few other differences the Johnson Red had. But these are the baseline runs, and these are what we'll use from here on out for this here saw. And we're going to make a pair of these, one a muffler racer and one a pipe racer. 5 cube racers is what these are going to be. Well, here's the results. We ended up with 6.43 horse, 4.66 foot-pounds on the Johnson Red. And I threw in a stock Makita 7900, a 500i, and a 390 XP. These were just some random runs that I grabbed that kind of fit. So you can see, definitely not the power of the modern one. So we're not too far off of this Makita that came in. Makita Dolmar, whichever one you want to call it. One of the more choked up ones, 6.5 horse, 4.42. But it just doesn't spin up as far as what that one would. Then our 500i, definitely the same type of power, other than the 500s do lean out and will actually run up top. But on the dyno, they tend to stay rich and short like this. 390 XP, not a lot different. This one stayed a little bit richer. But you can see we're definitely lacking power compared to the 500i 390 XP. So for an old saw, definitely not too bad, but that's to be expected. Little bit short on power. So I'd like to say doubling this at minimum is going to be a good start. And I'd almost like to triple it on pipe if we can. You know, hit that 17, 18 horse mark on pipe for 80 cc's. I think that'll be quite the accomplishment. And that's what we're going to strive for. Try and make it as strong and fast as we can. But this one's definitely going to be a long-term project because we got to weld on the block, get it replated, make the head, make everything else, and make sure the saw itself is solid. So I just wanted to throw this one on the graph with some of the modern small 80cc, big 70cc saws just to see where it falls. But alrighty, well, make sure you check out one of these other videos. And thanks a lot, everyone.